Car bombs in Kabul, Al-Qaeda active again, Taliban forces in control of almost a third of Afghanistan. It's easy to be disheartened about that country's current situation, less than 2 years after NATO troops wrapped up their 13-year operation there. But Canadian journalist Sally Armstrong, who just returned from Afghanistan, says there's still reason for hope. And she joins us now for more. It's so good to welcome you back to TVO.
I'm glad to be here.
Can we put a map up first, and then we'll have you comment on what this is? Because here's, Sheldon, if you would, here's Afghanistan, where Canadian forces, of course, fought for more than a decade, losing 158 soldiers in the process. However, the Taliban may be stronger now than at any point since they were driven out of power in 2001. They control, as we say, just under a third of the country, all those purple areas that you see. And Sally, I guess I want to know, first off, how is it possible after more than a decade of war that the Taliban still control so much?
Well, you know, Steve, there are so many insurgents running around Afghanistan today. It's sort of like playing whack-a-mole. I mean, you've got the Taliban, you've got the Pakistani Taliban, you've got the Haqqani mob. They're the ones that do the suicide bombing. Al-Qaeda's resurfaced. Even ISIS has a small foothold in one province. And now you've got Uzbeks and Tajiks coming down out of the north to see if there's a piece of the action for them. So how are they doing it? They're making a lot of trouble in a lot of places. They're not hanging on to a lot of places, but they have indeed hung on to several.
So you don't dispute the notion that almost a third of the country is either under their control or influence?
I would say 25% of the country is under their influence, but I would say much more is challenged almost on a daily basis.
In Iraq, over the past couple of years, we of course have witnessed U.S.-trained and well-equipped Iraqi soldiers retreating in the face of much smaller but powerful numbers from ISIS and their fighting forces. Do you see that happening in Afghanistan as well?
You know, I don't. That's the short answer. But there is that attempt. ISIS is called ISKP in Afghanistan, which is the Islamic State of Khorasan province. They're in one province. They're not doing well. They're having trouble hanging on to the bit that they have. But it could happen. It could happen. There are enough people with all these various insurgents I just described to you. And you know who these are? These are discontented people. These are Taliban that are too moderate, or these are what we used to call the weekend warriors. Give them a few bucks and they'll go and, you know, shoot a few rounds on the weekend. There's enough of that all over the country that it could become a problem. One of the generals said to me, he said, we can't afford to leave Afghanistan in case of that. But he said, if the Americans leave, we can't afford to stay. This is significant.
Let me follow up on that, because Barack Obama has a former national security, I guess it was his director for Afghanistan and Pakistan on the National Security Council, Paul Miller, who had the following thing to say. He said, President Obama did not enter office bent on getting out of Afghanistan. He entered office bent on winning in Afghanistan. Those are different things. You can get out of a war anytime you like, so long as you don't care what happens afterwards and are not fighting for anything terribly important. But Obama clearly and repeatedly said he cared and said he believed that war was vitally important, which is why he wanted to win it, not end it. He promised to win an important war. By that standard, Obama plainly failed. If that's true, first of all, do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I absolutely do not. In fact, I think the man should read a little history. But he's talking about failure. There are significant problems in Afghanistan today. There are also 9 million children back in school, a third of them girls. The life expectancy in Afghanistan has gone from 42 years to 62 years during this period of time that the international community has been there. That's practically like a miracle. So people who throw words like failure around, I wonder what they're basing it on. And I wonder what Barack Obama would say to that comment. We know what he said when he was running to be president. We know what he said when he became president. And we also know that the American people, like the Canadian people, were through with Afghanistan. They want it out. Our people want it out. And is that what he's obliged to do? But it's not to say they don't have significant problems to solve.
Sure, but if he thinks they failed at doing what their prime directive was, which was to win the war, not just get out of the war, did we fail too?
You know what? This is an insurgency. we don't have a lot of experience or history in fighting an insurgency. When we talk about the war that way, it sounds like we're at war with the people of Afghanistan. We're at war with a fairly small collection of people who want to cling to old ways. This is a different kind of a fight. The generals I spoke to said there is no military solution to this fight. There's only a political solution.
How close are we getting to that?
Well, every time you think you're close, the Taliban cancel the meeting. Remember the meeting that we're supposed to have in Pakistan with the Taliban and the Afghan government. And 2 days before the meeting, they find out Mullah Omar has in fact been dead for 2 years. So everybody gets enormously upset, cancels the meeting. But you know, Steve, I've been going to Afghanistan since 1997.
How many trips you're taking, do you know?
I don't know. I was trying to add it up this morning. I don't know, but a lot.
Is it a dozen?
It's more than a dozen.
More than a dozen.
It's more than a dozen. If I had to guess, I'd say 20.
Okay.
But, you know, this country, it's tribal. It's also very primitive. And you have to say to yourself, what the heck do we think we're doing, turning this place around? But if we don't, again, the general said to me, right now this is a regional problem. It could escalate. It could become a world problem if they can't contain it to where it is. We know what happened before.
One of the guys whose job it is to contain and presumably find this political settlement is a guy you know. Shall we put a picture of him up here? President Ashraf Ghani, a Pashtun, declared winner of the Afghan election in September 2014, the election, the first independent vote, incidentally, organized without direct foreign assistance, was contested. He now heads a unity government with his political rival, Abdullah, who's a Tajik, who serves as chief executive. The voter turnout was 75%, which by our standards is pretty good. Ghani returned to his native Afghanistan in 2001 after 24 years abroad. He's a former economic advisor at the World Bank in New York. He served as Minister of Finance in the Hamid Karzai government. He was also at one point Chancellor at Kabul University. You know him.
I do.
You interviewed him many times.
Yes.
What do you make of him?
He's charming. He's brilliant. And he loves history. So you ask him a question as a journalist, you have to keep cutting him off because he's going to give you 200 years of answer. But you know, when I saw him very recently, I thought, it reminded me, do you remember when René Lévesque won in Quebec and someone got him on camera on the way to the stage saying, I can't believe this happened. Sometimes you get yourself in a position of leadership and you might have been the most popular guy on the ballot, and Ashraf Ghani has a lot of support. And he isn't getting the job done the way he wants to do it and the way the people thought he would do it. So why is that? Is it because of all this whack-a-mole insurgency going on? Or is he missing that elusive it factor for leaders? He is a charming man, and he is a devoted politician to the people of Afghanistan. And he's certainly taken on the topics that I'm most interested in, which are the women. But the job is not getting itself done. Now, imagine you have to share the presidency with Abdullah. Mm-hmm. They weren't exactly blood brothers before this.
He may be charming, but this is not a job that charm is going to get it done, right? It's pretty hard to charm the Taliban. Does he want to meet with the Taliban?
He does want to meet with the Taliban. He does want to get the job done. I think he has the best of intentions. I really do. But sometimes a leader can't deliver what he promised he would deliver. And it's that elusive it factor, I believe, because Ashraf Ghani was very popular. And he's not so popular today.
Not so popular because he wants to negotiate with
because
so many people think are terrorists?
Although there's changes, I mean, life for Afghans is better today than it has been in the past. They've got better education, better healthcare, better longevity. They've got technical skills now. People are on Facebook. But they wanted more. They wanted a sense of growth. And until you tame down this insurgency, you're not going to get the investment. The investors have left the country.
Mm-hmm. On the issues that you care about, dealing with women's rights and girls in education and so on, how is he on that?
He's very good. He's very good. He's appointed 4 governors, 4 women as governors of provinces. He is very in favor of altering the status of women. And everybody knows if you don't do that, you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, it's ridiculous. Look at every time they do something hideous to women in Afghanistan, which this year, remember, they stoned that young woman in Gore. They lynched Farakunda right in the streets of Kabul with the police standing around watching. They get international headlines. They don't get so many headlines when they build a new school. But he wants to reverse that. And he needs people to buy in. So he's getting buy-in, but he's not getting it from the warlords. He's not getting it from those old boys that have been there forever. And he wants to move the file faster. He appointed a woman to be Attorney General, and they lost the vote in Parliament. It has to be approved, as ours does. And 30 women didn't turn up to vote. And he said publicly to me,
30 women did
30
not,
members of Parliament didn't turn up
to
women.
vote for a woman
Yeah.
as AG.
And he said, I'm furious about that. And he should be.
Why didn't they? Does anybody know?
Well, were they told? Did they belong to men who said, you're only there because you're my puppet? These are questions that need to be put out to the public, and I think he's brave to do it.
Do you still have hope in him?
I do, but something's going to have to, several things have to move. You have to get the international community to come back to grow the place. You have to get the young people who are leaving at the rate of 1,000 a month, joining the trip across the Mediterranean with the Syrians. You've got to get them to stay. They're the future of this country. They're the young, educated kids that have abilities, and you have to get them to stay. And you've got to tamp down this insurgency.
Now, having said that, 2/3 of the country, I gather, is still under the age of 30. And we've got a bunch of pictures here, and I want you to take us through these pictures. Just look at the monitor up there and tell us what we're seeing. What's this, Sally?
Okay, Steve, this is so delightful, and this is typical of young people the world over. They just haven't heard no often enough to give up. That young woman, Negan, is 19 years old. She is a conductor. This is an all-girls symphony orchestra. Now, they're not challenging the Toronto Symphony, I can tell you that. But my God, they had that cheeky look on their faces looking at me as if to say, you know what, miracles can happen. Almost all these kids are either orphans or street kids. The drummer was blowing bubbles with bubble gum when I was there. They were at their rehearsal because their event was the next night. And this, to me, is the difference. They see the Taliban as an enormous nuisance in their lives.
Didn't a suicide bomber attack one of their concerts?
Last year, a suicide bomber. The Taliban think it's evil to have music. So they sent a suicide bomber, and one of the visitors, a German person, was killed. And their leader, Ahmed Sarmast, who started this Institute of Music, lost his hearing in one ear. But they see them as a nuisance.
And they're keeping on, keeping on.
They've been invited to Carnegie Hall next year.
How about that?
How do you like that?
That is pretty cool. Okay, next picture. Sheldon, if you would. The next picture. 2 women and bicycles.
Oh, now
What's
these
this?
girls, now they'll be mad at me that you're using a picture without their helmets on, because they do wear helmets. These are 2 young women from Bamiyan province. And again, girls are not supposed to go on bicycles. And they just thumb their nose at these old-fashioned, out-of-date, in their opinion, useless rules, and hopped on their bikes, and they're now racing. And they've elicited 8 other women, and they're doing all kinds of extreme sports, extreme skiing, extreme cycling. And the one on the right, as I look at that picture, Zakia, she started paragliding. And she got these great wings onto herself, and you run across to the edge of a hill, and she took off, and she looked at me, and she said...
Sheldon, bring it up, because I think we've got that.
Have you got
Is that the next
picture?
I think so. And they've got their helmets on here.
Well, that's me with the girls, where they're just rolling up the paraglider. But as she took off, she turned to me and she said, I feel like a bird that just got out of its cage.
Ah, nice.
Aren't they fabulous,
Nice
these
metaphor.
kids? Yeah.
So life for men...
But you know what? Let me
Go
look
ahead.
at that.
Yeah.
See, the boys are watching. I love this. The boys are watching. The girls are doing.
So in some way, I mean, clearly this kind of thing was not acceptable when the Taliban were in control of the whole country. So in some respects, life is better in Afghanistan today for all of the world's and their efforts. Fair to say?
It's fair to say that, I mean, they're criticized for driving their bikes, but they're not stopping.
Afghanistan has contributed the 2nd largest group to Europe's migration crisis. We talked about it a few moments ago, the Syrians and Afghanistans. Can this country sustain that kind of a brain drain?
No, they cannot. But I'll tell you, when I was there, a plane landed from Germany. You know, Germany is now processing these people, and if you don't pass the refugee test, you get sent back. So when I was in Kabul, a plane arrived with 180 young men who didn't pass the refugee test. And you know what they said? They said it cost a fortune, it was terrifying, and we were very unhappy, and we're glad to be home. So in a way, I think that that reversal has begun. I mean, it's a little early to say that 180 have returned, and that makes up for 1,000 a month, maybe 1,200 a month. But there's things going on. The university called Gawarshad, which is new and very advanced, Dr. Seema Samar, the great human rights person, started it. And they have now put in programs to try to encourage these kids to stay, to improve job opportunities, to talk to them about the future of the country and that it belongs to them.
We can't have you here without asking what you think our contribution, our Canadian contribution to all of this ought to be, having spent more than a decade there spilling blood and treasure. Do you know what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has planned for the Afghanistan file?
I do not know, and I have asked. The Warsaw Conference is in July, and that is when each country steps up to the plate to say, we're supporting or we're not supporting, and we're supporting to this degree or we're backing down. We have a quite amazing ambassador there. Her name is Deborah Lyons. She comes from the Miramichi. Can you believe it? She calls everybody dear. And they,
one of 3 female ambassadors there, I think?
There are 3 now. She was the only female for a long time, but she's the go-to ambassador for the women. She's really doing things that I think makes Canada very, very proud. Her term will be up eventually, and we'll have a new ambassador. We'll support, we'll draw back, I don't know.
I'm going to reveal something that I probably shouldn't here, but this is the sad truth of Afghanistan. Over the past many, many years, whenever we discuss Afghanistan on this program, and we're not slaves to ratings here, we're not in private television, we're not delivering eyeballs to advertisers, but when we do Afghanistan, and we do it because we think it's important, our ratings go down. And I am sure that the Prime Minister of Canada knows that this is not a popular topic and that there is a certain fatigue with Afghanistan. Do you think as a result, maybe he has no plans for this country going forward?
I think there's a danger in that because Afghanistan has fallen off the radar. I admire you enormously for keeping it on, and I don't know why I keep going back. I think there has to be a better chapter to write somehow. But the world got fed up with Afghanistan, and you hardly see it. You know, I did 2 stories when I was there, one about the government and the presidency, and the other one about these young girls doing these extreme sports. There was very little response to the first one about the government, but there's a huge response to these girls. It's all over the place, all over Twitter and Facebook. So I think people might like a little bit of good news. But has our government analyzed this and made a decision that the people are not interested? The problem with that thinking is, as the general said, right now it's a regional problem. If you don't tame it, it will become a world problem.
Have you, after returning from Afghanistan from any of your trips in the past, ever met with Canadian either officials or politicians or foreign ministers or this kinds of thing to get debriefed on what you saw?
A couple of times I have.
You allowed to talk about that at all?
Well, it was Carolyn Bennett, who was always very interested when she was in Member of Parliament in other stages of government. She would always invite me to come and speak to the women members of Parliament about what is going on with the women, and she never let that go. I have been invited to speak to foreign affairs ministers and defense ministers. I have.
Not that I'm trying to give political advice to anybody, but seems to me that a new government might just want to listen to what you have to say, given how many times you've been there. That's just me. Okay, I don't expect you to say anything to that. I'm just putting that out there. Sally Armstrong, it's really good of you to make time for us here at TVO. We always love your visits. Thanks so much, and continued success with your trips to Afghanistan.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.